Bonjour, welcome back. Bienvenue to the innovation stage. I'm Laura, and I'm really lucky to be introducing our next speaker, Alan Ashley, who will be discussing protecting data in a non-production environment with anonymization. So Alan is a solution architect with more than 30 years of experience who has seen firsthand the pains that many have with application, lifestyle management, modernization, and data protection. So I will let him take it away. Please join me in welcoming Alan.
Can anyone hear me okay? Just nod yes. Okay. So, as I said, my name's Alan Ashley. I am based out of Georgia, and we're here to kind of discuss your training environments and where does that data come from. So, as we get into this, I will go through just a little bit of the backstory because there is a history on how we got to where we are today. So, ARCAT actually started working on anonymization back before GDPR came around. This brand was actually developed in 2005, and as you know, GDPR came around shortly thereafter. So I always ask folks when they're talking about anonymization, just so they understand what they're getting into, is many times they think they're doing anonymization, but they really say they're doing, or really want, field encryption. The same thing goes into, do you know what your requirements are from your security teams? Many do not. Many don't know what policies they're supposed to be following. Do they need to adhere to GDPR? And the big one is, I always ask, where do you get your data that goes into your training environment or into your testing environment? Odds are it's production. And you go to great lengths to protect that production data. But as many know, when you start getting into the development areas, you have developers in there that have higher authority. And guess what? They can still see real data, real PII data. Now, as we go through this, I said I'd give a little history, not much, but just kind of going back even to the late 1800s, the United States Supreme Court actually wrote a paper on starting to protect personal property. And this came about because of newspapers and photography. So even back into the 1800s, they realized that this was going to be an issue. And you can just go through time and you start talking about the Privacy Acts, the Cable Acts, the European Directive of Protection. You get into the 90s of HIPAA, the Telecommunications Act, and the big one, which is, for the most part, a global standard because every business does business with someone in the EU, and so we have to adhere to GDPR. And this is where our anonymization product comes in because we fill that void to make sure that you are protected in your test environments. And for more in the US, we recently had the CCPA come around. And this is going to be more or less our version of GDPR when it actually starts spreading across the country. But much like GDPR is global, CCPA is going to be the United States standard because everyone does business in California. So when you start talking about what to anonymize, you've got PII, everyone's heard of this. You've got your personal data, everyone's heard of this. But what are those? Your names, your addresses, social security numbers, what makes you identifiable that I can look at this data and go, oh, that is John Smith. Well, people started looking at that, and that's where GDPR came from. That's where CCPA came from. And more recently, that's where the right to be forgotten came from. They realized that people can start to put one and one together and figure out who you are, and they can take advantage of that data. And again, you probably have your production environments locked down. They are protected from outside resources. They're protected from inside resources. Only the people that need to see it can see it. But when you have a training environment, you have new employees coming on. You have testers, development testers that may be out of country. Do they have the authority or permissions to see real data? Are they seeing real data? I've had a few companies call me and go, we got audited because our developmental data was real. And you had unauthorized persons able to see that data. And many people don't think of that. They go, that's the light bulb goes off, and they realize they may have a problem on their hands. When I was a system admin, one of the things that we always did, we made sure production was locked down. But there wasn't a requirement to do the same on the testing environments. So if you stop by the booth 704, you probably heard me talk about sensitive and non-sensitive PII. Well, you start looking at those, what could cause harm, what can't. Many people have the same date of birth. I mean, there's, 7 billion people in the world? There's going to be some overlap. Names are going to start overlapping. But bank accounts, social security numbers, those are the same. Those would be the things you start looking at to anonymize. But if anybody remembers a phone book, remember how much information was in a phone book? They show up in your mailbox, get thrown on your lawn, and there's hundreds and thousands of names, addresses, and phone numbers. Just open for anybody. When I was in college, one of the things they did is my student number was my social security number. And every test that I took had my social security number on it. Every grade that was posted outside the professor's door had my social security number on it. This is in the 90s. Nobody cared. Well, guess what? People start caring now. And that's why we've got this motion to start protecting this data. And of course, university did change their policies, and you now get random numbers for students. But you say, what about a date of birth? Shouldn't I anonymize that? Well, yes, but you have to know your data. You have to understand what your data is linked to and how it's linked together. You know, if it's just the date of birth and a name, you can anonymize the name, and now it's not identifiable. So, and this is the one. So the conversation starts off, and you start listening to somebody talk, and what they're talking about is really encryption, or I call it pseudo-anonymization. Imagine it's the door to your data. It's encrypted. You open the door, you can see the data. It's real data. That's what they think they want. But when you start talking about test data, guess what? When you unlock the door, if you don't anonymize it, it's still real data. It's still my social security number associated with me and my date of birth and all my information. So encrypting it solves one problem. It can handle the in-transit problem. It can handle the at-rest problem. It does not handle eyes that see it that may be not authorized to see it. And that's where anonymization comes in. You know, I mentioned a little bit about data at rest. And again, that's where encryption comes in. You can have encryption in your test environments. You can have those fields set up to encrypt just like you would in production so that you can test your application. But again, when you open that door, what data are you seeing? Okay, so that's the backstory. Okay, I understand that stuff's a little, I'm tired of listening to that. I want fun, geeky stuff. So you get into where's your data used? Is that a training environment, test? Who's seeing this? Can it slide into your current extract, transfer, load process? Can it fit into a pipeline? You have all this grandiose code that you go through and you extract data and you subside it, and next thing you know, you have to transfer it and anonymize it. We can fit in, anonymization takes place anywhere in there. Ooh, that did not translate well. So you have flat files, you have databases. It goes off to a staging area. It gets sent off to training and test. And again, here's the thing. I can't give you the right answer on when to do it, where to do it, or how to do it. I can provide the tools, but I can't tell you when to do it because there is no wrong answer. You can do it right on production and send it off. You can do it into a staging environment. You can send it over to test. So why are we here? Our little product, .anonymizer. So when you start talking about anonymization, one of the things you have to keep in mind is, can it work across multiple databases, multiple OSs, multiple file structures? What is it doing? Now, ideally, you want to use, I'd like you to use our product, but there are dozens of products out there that do similar like things. But you have to keep in mind, you have to ask those questions. Can it work with MySQL and Postgre and my CSV file from HR? Can all those tie in together? Can it maintain a caching environment across those? So you have your data sources. You can apply rules to those, and it can automatically detect, is that PII data? You might have a rule that says social security numbers. Hey, this looks like a social security number. And you can have a regex engine go through and give you new social security numbers. But one of the things is social security numbers can also look like credit card numbers. They can also look like accounting numbers. So it may say, hey, this looks like a social security number. This also looks like an account number, and this may look like a credit card number. Well, you would go then, and you have to know your data, and say, okay, this is social security. I want this rule, and this rule to run against my data set. And that's what you would get. And as I mentioned, you're talking about the ETL. It can fit anywhere into that process. And so this would be kind of the flow that you'd go through. You start at your databases. You'd figure out what you have. You go through the discovery. You review it. And it's not something that you walk in day one and go, ooh, I'm going to run this. I'm going to anonymize all my data. Or I'm going to step in and use my right to be forgotten process to remove somebody from a production database. That's not day one. You have to know your data. You have to see that your rules are going to fit within your data sets. Because if you have a rule that transforms a city, well, maybe you need to make sure it stays a city within a certain country or a certain state. So you have to make sure those rules are in place. We have the engines, the rules come off of those. And again, that did not transfer well to PDF. So what can an anonymizer do? Multiple databases, multiple OSs. It's database and OS agnostic. That's a key. And again, there are other tools that do this, and that's fine. You have to make sure it can work across your entire landscape of environments. And when you're looking at anonymization, one of the things you have to keep in mind is, do I get usable data out of it? Yes, you can randomize anything. I can take my name, throw in 10 different letters, and I have nothing useful out of it. But it'd be much better off if you took my name, Alan Ashley, and made it David Jones. David Jones is a usable name. You can function with that. Other things that you need to check out is, can it do auto detection of your PII information? How much comes with the products? How much can be customized for you? And again, if you're dealing with anything with the right to be forgotten, you want to make sure that your tool can also expand to that, because when you start talking about the right to be forgotten, it's more than just removing a line from a row from your table. Because, and this is the example I use, I just bought a Porsche. I didn't, but let's assume I did. And I got heated and vented seats. And I wanted it in red. And I wanted a special audio system in it. Now I have multiple rows across the Porsche database. And now I want to be forgotten. If they delete me and everything about me, then they have now lost the account of one car, vented seats, audio customization, are all gone from their reporting. They have no record of it now. With the right to be forgotten, what you want to do is you find that PII information and anonymize it. So Alan Ashley bought a Porsche. That's fine. You change it to David Jones. You can't relate it to me anymore. They have fulfilled their obligation under the law that I am no longer associated in their database. It is now somebody else. But from a marketing, from a supply chain view, they still know when that car was bought. They still know what options I got. They still have all that information. That's key. Because yes, I could go through and just go delete and wipe out that row across 15 tables. But everything, all the numbers behind it just got skewed. And so when you start looking at the ways to anonymize, one of my favorites is a directory, only because I need valid information in a certain order, such as I need cities within certain states. So if I anonymize the state of Georgia or Tennessee, I want to make sure I get cities from Tennessee or Georgia so that the relevant data within the application stays the same. But again, you can scramble it, regex it. One of my favorites also is groovy scripting it, where you can start doing multiple fields and combining them to get new anonymized data. So, got a little walkthrough. I'm going to walk you through just a little demonstration of how this works. Let's see if this is going to play through. So, what you're going to be looking at is a record of MySQL. This is a table just in MySQL of Skylar, okay? And you want to look at Skylar, and you'll see his name. And he's also got some banking information down at the bottom. Now, we're also going to have another database that's going to look just like this, but it's going to be PostgreSQL. And this is the same information, the same emails, same names that you see here. And this is going to show you how the caching takes place. And caching can be done at an execution level, meaning you run the project. And once the project's gone, the cache is gone. It's gone forever. You can never make Skylar somebody else. When you get into the tool, you have different rules. And these are the rules some of the ones that have been set up for this project. And above that, you have some of the detection methods that can be used. And this is what I was talking about in helping you identify your PII. And so it's going through and it's looking at some directories. It may look at a regex. I use regex on phone numbers to help identify those as well. And off of that, you get your transformation engines. And here we have dozens of engines that could possibly run off of this across multiple databases, as I've mentioned. This one's a directory because they want real names. They don't want it to have to randomize letters to come up with a fake name. They want real names so that when you're discussing it and looking at it, it looks real. It looks like you're doing what you need to do. And from there, you build out a rule set. And what we're driving toward here is the ability to run the detection method. So you set up your rules, you set up your engines. And again, I come back to this. I can't help you do this. You have to know your data. I can provide the tools, I can provide the expertise, but I don't know your data. And that's where this comes in and starts helping you. Is it helps you identify within your data, even if you don't know that you may have PII, it can help you. It can help identify that. And it goes through and it creates a project. And so this is what it came out with. And so it's like, remember when I said you might have multiples that fall under the same rule? It's because they look very similar. An address might look like a mailing address, may look like an office address. A name may look like a username as well. And so you go through and you can see how it matched up. And you can set those thresholds as well on what's going to match up. And so you just go and create your project and say, okay, I want this rule against this table, against this field. And you'd go through and select those. And it would create your project straight from there. And what's nice is now you've got this project and it's running and you can use it over and over again against your data. So the first time you have a data import, you can run this to see what it's going to look like. What do you have to deal with? And as you can see here, we're doing some related fields, and this is where you get into some groovy scripts. So it's going to take anonymized data and apply it to an incoming groovy script to maybe get a new email address and so forth. You can also run them in sequences so that it goes MySQL, Postgre, et cetera, et cetera. And as you can see here, the names have changed. And the nice thing here is that we talked about caching. It will carry this across multiple databases if you use cache or execution cache, which is key because if you start thinking about your system of record, which would be a backend server, it could be a mainframe, it could be an IBM I, it could be a Windows server. But then you also add the front end aspects of it. Maybe you have an Oracle database sitting over in HR that has some of the similar data. Well, this handles that. It will allow you to change it across multiple tables, fields, so that, again, it's usable data. So just kind of to wrap up here, and thanks to my southern speed, we were able to get through this pretty quickly. So what is the solution? You need automated discovery of your data, because can you look at your data and go, yes, that needs to be protected, or no, that does not? Are you desensitizing your test data, your training data, even your DR test data? Maybe you have people that are seeing real production data that they don't need to be seeing it, because as you know, most theft occurs internally, not from outside resources. Whatever tool you go with, it needs to be database and OS agnostic. You have to be able to use it across multiple platforms. Otherwise, it's not useful. Yes, I can anonymize my SQL server, but that's all I can do. That does you no good if you've got a Postgre, maybe you've got a Mongo database, maybe you produce some flat files out there. If you can't do all those within the same tool, what do you really get? And of recent, there's been a need to anonymize some of those flat files, such as a JSON file. Maybe that JSON file gets produced from a table out of your DB2. Well, now we need to make sure that they're all cached together. And this tool can do that. Now, you start thinking, okay, I've heard cache. That means something's getting stored somewhere. Is there a way to get it back? Can you reverse it? There is an option to say reverse, but that kind of defeats the purpose. You don't want to be able to reverse your data. You don't want to be able to go back to where you started. So with execution cache, you run your project and it all goes away. All your cache goes away. There's no way to make John Smith, Henry Jones ever again. Or like some people like their testing environments to maintain some consistency. So maybe you keep execution cache on names, but you keep constant cache on things like social security numbers or addresses, or however you'd like to set it up, because you can combine the two. Then every time you run it, you end up with some consistency so that when you're looking at your test data or your training data, you know what to expect. And just kind of to wrap up, if you want any more information, again, this could be found on /anonymizer.com. It's part of the ARCAD software suite of tools. And it does fall into a normal DevOps pipeline. It can be automated. It can come right off of a Jenkins pipeline through a CLI or different APIs that can do it on the fly. I believe some of these links you can actually get to through the presentations. I believe they'll probably be posted. If not, I'll pause it here and you can take a picture. And again, I'm in booth 704 today and tomorrow if you'd like to come by and discuss anything around anonymization. And I'm hoping you all are having a great time at FIC. I know I am. This has been fun. This has been exciting. Kind of a new area for me to present in. I do know my CEO wanted to be here. He is very passionate about this, and coming out of France, he's very familiar with the rules that take place over there. And he wanted to come and say thank you for attending, but his travel schedule prevented him from making it in today. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your conference.